My God, I hate drugs.
Well, I want to move the conversation on to the financing in terms of the national debt. I think the national debt, well, GDP, debt to GDP ratio stands at around 42%. Forbes magazine says that under the build, the massive borrowings, that could blow out to around about 140% over the next 10 years. Tie that in with, we heard earlier, that we don't have a trade surplus anymore. There is a trade deficit and a weaker peso with this growing national debt. Is this not cause for concern for the national accounts now?
False news. That projection is wrong. Our projection is that it will continue to decline. All right?
The national debt will continue to decline?
The debt to GDP ratio, which is the important metric, not the absolute level of debt. It's your debt in relation to GDP. Right now you said 40, 42, right? Our projection is it will continue to decline to about 37 to 38.
Even with this borrowing?
Yes, even with this. So we're confident. We're confident that we will be able to finance the projects without getting us into a debt crisis.
Just can you explain how that works? Because
we will outgrow our debt.
So this is an economic growth.
Sure.
Outperforming
7 to 8% plus in nominal terms plus 3%. Maybe we will growing in nominal terms at 10%. The debt, the interest rates are very low, so we will outgrow our debt. So that report is false.
While we're talking on, excuse me, yes,
Andrew, that's the total debt to GDP ratio. But in terms of foreign debt, external debt to GDP ratio, it's only 23%. So that's the more critical metric actually, because those are foreign loans that you're talking about.
Receive doctrine says that if your debt to GDP ratio is 60% or lower, you're in pretty good shape. We're in good shape compared to, say, what? Japan's debt to GDP ratio is more than 200%. US more than 100%. China is.
Can I put that to BDO? Do you have any concerns about the government's finances under build?
Frankly, no. We believe in what they're doing, the economic team, and we're very supportive of train. So in fact, as long as the train packages are continuing,
talk about train, the tax
train
package,
too, and the rest. Yeah, we support where you're going in getting the upgrade. So we're behind you.
Okay, so there's no red flags. The balance of trade turning to deficit is not a red flag. Weaker peso introducing inflation is not a red flag.
The trade deficit has always been there. It is increasing because we have a lot of capital requirements. The bulk of our imports is, in terms of value, is due to capital imports, import of capital goods, and intermediate products that are needed in building and in our construction activity.
We have a very hefty reserves, equivalent to 8 months of imports. The rule of thumb is if you can cover 3 months of your imports, you're okay. Our reserves can cover about 8 months of imports. And we have a steady inflow of overseas remittances plus the BPO. That's about $50 billion every year. So we're okay.
All right.
So the numbers do add up, sir. The country can raise the money and deliver. This program is sustainable.
Very safe, very safe. It's all systems go for us. Nothing can stop us now.
Sounds like a song.
Sounds like a song, doesn't it? I'd like to ask a question about, you talk about the ODA, and we've mentioned Japan a couple of times about Japan being a donor of very low interest rate loans. And China has also been mentioned. China will be a part of ODA assistance as well. On the back of that, you may have seen this quote from Rex Tillerson, the former US Secretary of State, and talking about China's practices as far as ODA and what has been termed the China debt trap. Now, this is his quote. Beijing encourages dependency using opaque contracts, predatory loan practices and corrupt deals that mire nations in debt and undercut their sovereignty, denying their long-term self-sustaining growth. Now, this is what I talk about, this China debt trap. Are you aware, is this a concern within the government that this is something you actively have to avoid?
Yes, we are aware of that. We read a lot of reports from Sri Lanka, from African countries, Pakistan, and we are well aware of that, and we are
How do you
making
guard against
haste slowly with China. Actually, only one project, a minor project, an irrigation project in Tuguegarao, which is a small project, an irrigation project. That's the only one that has been signed so far. The other projects that that are potentially fundable. In fact, the Chinese are interested in funding them. They have not. They have been moving very slowly.
Right. Yeah. Is there a way of guarding against the potential of that happening?
Well, we just have to, as I've said, make haste slowly in terms of Chinese funded projects, so that we know at every step of the way we know where the pitfalls are in terms of Chinese funding. Yes.
All right, let's talk about jobs. What jobs are we talking about here? On Tuesday, you launched that jobs portal on bcda.gov, no? Secretary Mark, what jobs are going to be available?
Yes, actually, it's a multitude of jobs, as you know, with these. I think a large issue for why there's this some firms have a hard time is also placing. Where do you go to, and what is the medium for which you can attract or hire talent? So now we've created this portal that we launched that's called Jobs. So along with the build, we have the Jobs portal. And we just started it. We already have posted 11,000, but that's just the start. Now, if you see that, it's broken down per project. And then when you click on the project, under that, you can see all the available positions that the companies are looking for enhancement. So I think this is an important part of what we're doing, is the job generation aspect. And it's something that the President is very keen on with this job generation. And we created this portal in order to expedite the process and make it easier for us to create less friction in terms of the job market.
But we're looking at how many jobs? More than a million, right?
Our estimate is 1.1 million average jobs created annually. 1.1 million, and due to when the projects are on stream, they're already they've broken ground and they are in full blast, then we would be averaging around 1.1 million over the next 5 years. But of course, this includes direct employment as well as indirect employment from construction and all that.
Yeah, construction, there's a construction boom. Is it true there is a labor shortage? And how is that going to, is that a threat to build? Paano po yun?
Yes, it is. And in fact, I think there are some already OFWs that are coming back. I saw a number of 32,000 that have come back.
And these are the skilled workers that we need.
That's correct. The technical kind of workers.
Yeah, but when we say we're bringing home the OFWs, they earn a certain amount abroad. We are saying that we're going to pay them the same amount.
Well, they would be earning competitive compensation vis-a-vis what they have been getting. There are so many projects in the provinces that are also going to be that are going on stream that would create a lot of employment.
Now, there are two phases to this program. There is build, and that leads to jobs.
And of course, if there are jobs, the other target here is to reduce poverty. At the moment, more than 1 in 5 people, about 1.6% living below the poverty line. Like Andrew, you were going to say, right?
Yeah.
Under this massive infrastructure program.
Well, with an infrastructure program like that, when you've got 1 in 5 people living below the poverty line, the actual government target by 2022 is to reduce that to 14%. And at the end of the day, you think, what is this? You talk about comfortable, about making Filipinos' lives more comfortable. Reducing poverty has to be the key topic there.
All right. But of course, before we go to reducing poverty and challenges, we wanted to give the floor first to Secretary Tugado, who's going to wrap up what he's going to say, and then Secretary Mark Villar. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. We have revisited in generic presentation what we are doing with air, what we are doing with maritime. Let's revisit the rails. The present population of the rail system now is only 77 kilometers. It is hoped that by the end of President Duterte's term, this administration would have completed 1,900 kilometers of railway system, such that you have rail system being put up from Manila to from Tutuban to Malolos to Clark. You have Clark
the
to
North
Subic
Railway.
in terms of cargo. You have from Tutuban to Calamba, Los Baños going to Bicol.
That is the South Railway.
Yes,
right?
ma'am, the
PNR
South Railway.
Okay.
You have the expansion of LRT2, and then you have LRT1, then you have MRT7, then you have improvements on MRT3. All this covers a motley of funding platforms. It is not limited to one kind of funding platform. And then there is the subway. Before, subway was a talking piece. In this administration, the mode of implementation is already in place. Why in place? When the idea of having the first subway in the Philippines was brought up and planning was made, the start of construction would have begun or is scheduled to start next in the year 2019, third quarter. Today, as we plan, as we deliberate, and as we talk with the private sector and the government of Japan, we will start the construction of partial operability of the first subway station, covering 3 places: North Avenue, Mindanao Avenue, and Tandansora, with a railway institute being put up in Valenzuela, which will also serve as a depot. These are plans which are being done, being implemented in barely 2 years of the Duterte administration. How will this be funded? It will be funded under a preferred loan arrangement with the government of Japan. Again, biddings will be in process. There will be construction. And the construction can be handled by the private banks and the private sectors. And this is what I mean when we said, what we have now is a basket of opportunity of funding. It cannot be limited just to one. And I mentioned the specific situations because it points to the reality that we have here a basket of funding sources on projects that are predicated in building the future, which is the topic of our gathering today. And then you speak of terminals on the road. You have the modernization program, all requiring funding. There is a partnership, and there should be a partnership between government and the private sector. We in government cannot say, we can do this alone. And you, the private sector, with due respect, cannot say, hey, leave it to us. Government should do something else. It must be a duality of role, mutually respecting each other's capacity and capability.
Well, anyway, I just want to just to reemphasize what they mentioned earlier about the robust cooperation that we have with the private sector in terms of infrastructure projects. And I can speak for the DPWH with regards to our various projects. For instance, with San Miguel, our TR4, which is going to Lucena, which will be starting this year. That's a long-delayed project. We have the Harbor Link, which we've acquired 90% of the right-of-way, which will be delivering at the third quarter of this year. We also have the first exit of the Skyway, which will also be opened. We're targeting by the second quarter of this year. My point is, in terms of cooperation with the private sector, I believe that this administration has given its full support. And I know this because I regularly meet with all our concessionaires. And we've not only pushed the existing, we've also awarded new projects, such as the NLEX-SLEX Connector Road, which will also be starting construction this year. That was recently. And we have also other unsolicited proposals that we are considering and which were previously never entertained?
I just want to quickly bring Bill Lutz into this, and the National Competitive Council. Just listening to the funding opportunities and the funding avenues, do you think the mix is right as far as getting the competitiveness of the Philippines on the increase?
I think the funding issues have been are always going to be constantly addressed because the needs are going to be so large. At the end of the day, it also boils down to speed. And in the Philippine context, within ASEAN, we're a large country and growing, but we are way behind on the competitiveness rankings in infrastructure, not just the general competitiveness rankings. So when I take a look at the full range of infrastructure, roads, ports, airports, telecom, energy, rail, we're ranked somewhere between, say, 97 and 120 out of 137. So we're kind of in the lower half of the spectrum. So we need to move with some speed to be able to get to that, to be able to move up with the competitiveness ranking. So I think that's one item that I think we need to be very mindful of. The second is that even as we address all the funding issues, there are probably other issues we need to look at. I just want to flag two maybe that we ought to be really thinking about, and I know the government is thinking about it. One is case of resilience. You know, when we build the infrastructure, they're all designing more resilience into it because of the nature of the of our situation with weather and seismic activity and things like this. And it's one of the reasons why our office at PDRF, for instance, moved to Clark. Thanks to the foresight of Secretary Tugade and working with Vince, because we felt that we needed to move to places that are going to be, offer us a better chance at resilience. But the issue, I think, that it cuts across all these things, aside from the funding, I think, is really going to boil down to right-of-way issues. There are a lot of projects out there, but if we don't kind of break those bottlenecks in right-of-way issues, projects can come to a stop. So we have to be very careful about spotting that and debottling that, and debottlenecking that. And I think that's something that the government and the private sector will need to identify early on and work through, because the projects are there, I think the funding is there, but speed gets affected every time we hit little bumps in the road like that.